in 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is High Point Mayor Jay Wagner calling to order the High Point City Council special meeting for today, which is Monday, February 7th. We have several items on the agenda, and I will begin by letting everyone know who is here. Councilman Britt Moore, Wesley Hudson, Vic Jones, and Cyril Jefferson are all present at City Hall, as am I. Others will be filtering in as we move along, but we'll go ahead and begin the meeting. And first item is an update on the personnel resolution, and I believe David Woodard is here for that.
Yes.
Along with our own city attorney.
As council knows, we've been working with the manager and the HR department to make some revisions to the current personnel resolution, to bring it up to date, to reflect more of what we're doing on a daily basis, and to just improve it in every area that we possibly could. So with that, I will turn it over to our outside attorney, David Woodard, to cover some points. And I believe you guys should have a paper in front of you. The first part of it gives you some history, kind of what I just said, and a little bit longer spiel, and then some bullet points that David will be covering.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Joanne.
Sir, you might want to come up here to the mic.
Thanks very much. I'll try to be brief. We did a really extensive review and analysis of your personnel resolution. As many of you remember, the last time we went through this was 2017. There's been a lot of changes in the law and a lot of operational changes in High Point that we wanted to address and make sure that the personnel resolution was caught up with all of those changes. So our law firm went through this. We've met with the manager, with human resources, with the executive team at High Point. Had a lot of eyes on it to make sure that it's operationally fits the organization, that we're doing what the PR says that we're doing. And just to go through a couple of the highlights, Section 1, where we initially set out the roles of the main players under the personnel resolution, which are City Council, the Manager's Office, and the Department of Human Resources. We cleared up some ambiguities on who has authority to do what with respect to the personnel resolution. We've made it clear in the resolution now that council is the sole authority who can amend, revise, adopt, or not the personnel resolution and any provisions in it. So made it clear that the city outside of council can't make revisions to this document. So that's clear now. We've made it clear that the personnel policies that are adopted in compliance and consistent with this personnel resolution are in the manager's wheelhouse, that she has the final authority on what to adopt or revise or amend with respect to human resource policies, with the input of the Human Resources Department and that department's advice and counsel. And that the HR director is now responsible, and has been responsible, but it's clarified that that department's role is day-to-day enforcement and interpretation of the policies and this personnel resolution with regard to employees. Sections 2 and 3, the changes there were largely to bring the personnel resolution consistent with practices in the city. There weren't any really major legal issues wrong or with that section, but we have made it clear that council is responsible for setting budget, obviously, that any new positions have to be approved by council, any eliminated positions have to be approved by council. But beyond that, the manager's office and the human resources department set up job descriptions, pay scales, set pay rates for employees. We've given we've developed some more discretion in starting salaries, for example, of new employees, because we noticed that there was, in the old resolution, basically it said outright that a new hire had to start at the bottom of the pay grade, and that's just kind of puts you behind the curve from a competitive basis with other cities and private employers. So now there's some discretion for hiring managers to set a starting salary between the base pay and the midpoint, and beyond that, they have to have the manager's approval to go forward. So we changed some things like that that should make life and hiring a little bit easier for the city. Section 4 is the recruiting and hiring procedure that we presented to you back in November that the council has already voted on. That's the one where we kind of defined how jobs are advertised, what kind of recruiting efforts we're going to do to help foster our DEI initiatives. None of that has changed substantially since the last time you saw it, but it's going to be in this new document. Let's see. Conditions of employment, which is section 5. All we did there really was remove some ambiguities, make sure you were fully consistent with current employment laws. The most, I guess, significant change that we put into the conditions of employment section of the personnel resolution was to give council the ability to relax residency requirements for hiring a manager or a city attorney or a clerk if circumstances warrant that. And the same authority is given to the manager for hiring deputy and assistant city managers if circumstances warrant relaxing the residency requirement that was in place and was a strict requirement. In section 6, in vacation and leave, we just cleaned that up a lot to remove some ambiguities and inconsistencies. We had to make sure that all of our leave policies and all the rights that employees had while they're on leave were consistent with the FMLA. In some places, it was a little bit confusing as to whether or not, in writing, that we were consistent. We were doing it consistently in the city, but we just cleaned things up to make sure that people on discretionary leave, people on FMLA have the same rights and benefits up to the same level as anybody else on any other kind of leave. Same for military leave. We added Veterans Day and Juneteenth to the holidays that are in the PR. Those are the two biggest changes there. In the benefits section, that was really just a cleanup of the language, clean up some ambiguities, nothing material change there. In section 8, which is disciplinary action and suspensions, demotions, and dismissal, we made clear it was a little ambiguous whether or not written warnings and verbal warnings, things short of demotion and suspension and termination, were disciplinary actions. We've made it clear that they are. We've clarified the process that the city is going to go through for imposing disciplinary action for failures of personal conduct and for job performance failures, and have walked through sort of, it is not a progressive discipline policy that we're locked into where we have to go through verbal, written, final written, and then termination, but those are the presumed steps that we'll be following absent extraordinary circumstances. And we have revised section 9, grievances and discrimination grievances, cleaned up the process a little bit, but really what we added, the only thing we added were some provisions to deal with grievances that might be filed against the Human Resources Department because they ordinarily are handling all of the grievances and discrimination grievances that are coming in, so we wanted to remove a potential or an appearance of a conflict with them investigating themselves. So we've dealt with that with the manager's office handling any complaints that come in about the Human Resources Department. And if any that come in about the manager's office, we have a kind of a two-step process for handling that now. If a complaint comes in from a direct report of a manager, the complaint goes to the city attorney and then to council. If it's anybody else, a complaint will go to Human Resources and then to council, for council in both cases to decide what action to take if it's about the manager's office. And those are the big changes in the personnel resolution. Hardly a section was left untouched because there was just a lot of old language that wasn't fitting the city's operations anymore. We did a lot of cleanup. You could see the red line. It's almost all red line. A lot of work went into this with a lot of people and a lot of people's eyes. I think that the Human Resources Department, the manager's office, and the attorney's office are all on board with the changes that we've presented. We've met multiple times and exchanged many drafts of this document. And I think it's ready to go to council to be voted on.
Absolutely. I would say the 3-page summary that you have here doesn't even touch the amount of work that has gone into this project. You know, we had it going before our new manager came on board, and then it was really important and great timing that we were able to actually not have it done, even though we wanted it completed by then. It worked out well for her to come on board and then to also play a role in the review and any additions that she saw would be appropriate for, you know, to assist her in her daily duties as well. So I have a copy, unredlined copy for each of you. And Mayor, you can actually take a vote on this since you're in special session at this time, or you could add it to an addendum for the regular session.
Okay. Thank you.
We're glad to answer any questions as well. Again, I can't reiterate enough, there's been a lot of time, lots of good teamwork, outside attorneys, inside with the manager's office and the HR department. It's been a really good activity for us to work on together.
Anyone have questions for either or Joanne or David?
Section 1, the terminology about council has sole authority to create and eliminate positions. Define positions.
That would be any job that's listed on what the HR department is called the classification plan. It's any position you hire into. So, for example, if you wanted to hire in a new engineer, for example, it normally comes up in the budgeting process, from my understanding, but that's council has to fund it, and that's the issue. Council needs to approve the funding for the position. And once that is done, it's up to the manager's office or HR to set the pay for whoever fills that position.
And then they handle it from there.
Correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Moore, typically that's done each year when the budget is being adopted. And if there are any mid-year adjustments, new positions that are needed, or if there's a title that's needed in our pay plan to carry out some kind of work, then staff would bring that to council mid-year for you all to approve that if that happens outside of the budget. But we wouldn't be able to just create those positions internally and then fill those without council being aware of them.
Thank you.
Anyone else with any questions?
For the sake of time and redundancy, since we normally have to go right back through this again in council, did I hear that correctly? We could just vote on this?
We can
now?
vote on it now.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve this item. Is there any comments or additional questions? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And that motion passes. Thank you. All right, Mr. Almeida is very confident that I'm going to call on him next. And I am. Next on the agenda is American Rescue Plan update. Eric Almeida will be briefing us on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was very confident in the fact that you would call on me. Before I get started on the update, I would like to introduce the newest member of our department director team. Jeremy Coble is in the back. He's our new customer service director. Jeremy comes to us from the state of North Carolina, where he was an assistant director in taxation and collections, I believe. And we're very happy to have him. He's been on board for a week, and we're
Still here?
still here. Still here. I think he described it as drinking water through a fire hose last week, so we're happy that he's here. We wanted to give council a quick update. As you know, you've heard a number of times about the American Rescue Plan. We did receive final guidance from the Department of Treasury January 6th. And so our team, Stephen Haverluck and Bobby Fitzjohn and some others have spent a lot of hours on webinars trying to figure out exactly what this means for High Point. And so we just wanted to give you a quick update and open it up for questions if you had. Again, you know, the rescue plan was a federal program that delivered $350 billion to various states, local, and tribal governments across the country to respond to the COVID-19 emergency. High Point's allocation was $22,699,511. We have received half of that, and we expect the remainder to come into our coffers by the end of this fiscal year. They didn't really change the eligible uses. They kind of recategorized those uses, but there are the four main categories are responding to public health and economic impacts from COVID-19. Things like public health, assistance to households and small businesses and nonprofits and area impacted industries, and also to add public sector capacity to respond to COVID-19. They also allow premium pay, which applies to eligible workers that perform essential work have performed essential work during this. So they define that as somebody who had public contact, and so somebody who was teleworking during the entire COVID-19 situation probably isn't eligible for that, but somebody who did have public contact is eligible to receive premium pay through this. Other, I think I skipped I skipped the thing. How do I go back? Let me go there. Sorry, something happened to my slides. Other eligible uses are infrastructure, such as water, sewer, stormwater, and broadband. Although broadband although it's allowed here by the feds, it's not really allowed by the state for local governments to do, although we are participating in some Guilford County efforts that we'll be briefing the Prosperity and Livability Committee on Wednesday. The other category was revenue loss, which we've talked about. The ARPA funds can be used for revenue loss for governments, and for High Point, we've calculated that at $12.8 million. So that can be used for a broad number of governmental uses. So that's above what they've set as a floor of $10 million. So that's good for High Point. I think I'm hitting the wrong buttons here. There are a number of restricted uses. You can't use it to offset a reduction in net tax revenue. You can't use it for deposits into pension funds. You can't use it for debt service or replenishing financial reserves or to satisfy settlements or judgments. A big topic is program administration, and as you know, anytime you accept federal funds, you accept quite a number of rules and regulations. So our timeline for using these funds, we must obligate the funds by the end of 2024, and we must have them completely spent by the end of 2026. Federal uniform guidance is kind of the rule that oversees all federal spending. It's onerous, to say the least. There is a lot of paperwork, there is a lot of regulations that we have to follow, and there are a lot of regulations that not only do we have to follow, but agencies that we give money to have to follow as well. There's a lot to unpack there. We could probably have a 2-hour session just on uniform guidance. But as we go through this a little further and determine how these funds are going to be allocated, we just need to make sure that any partner agency that receives funds knows that there's a number of reporting regulations that they have to follow as well. Administrative expenses, we are allowed to charge a part of our administration of this to the grant or to the allocation. Some cities, larger cities that receive much more in dollars, are actually hiring positions to help administer this. We don't know if that's going to be necessary or not, but that's just a caution out there that there are a number of things that we have to abide by. On your desk, I've left at each place the list of capital projects we talked about at the last meeting. You all had asked for a prioritized list. We've basically broken this into 2 priorities. The first page, which equals about $3.8 million, is what we're calling high priority items. The second page, which is a little bit over $2 million, are still priorities for us, still priorities, which are items that if not funded through the ARPA funds, we would be bringing those back in the 2023 budget as capital requests in addition to the other capital requests that we make. Be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
There's still the option, though, to fund all of these,
Correct.
both pages.
The option and frankly, the preference, because these are necessary items, as we've discussed, that were deferred through the year of COVID and through this year's budget process.
And when are you expecting some action on this list from us?
Depending, Manager, do you want to take that one?
I'll take that.
What and when?
Well played.
Mayor, members of council, and ideally, staff would like to move on these as quickly as possible. We presented the capital items to you at the last meeting in January. There are a few of these where we're running into some timing where if we don't go ahead and place the orders, then they might not be able to get the items ordered and in time for us to meet certain programmatic deadlines. I think the other for council to just be aware of is that as we are delaying some of the decisions in terms of which capital items to fund, we're starting to see some of the costs increase associated with the projects. So staff's recommendation would be the same as it was the last meeting in January, where we fund all of the items that were delayed from last year's budget that were to be paid for out of ARPA funds. If we were going to just go with the high priority items, and council would like some additional time to think about the items that are on the second page, we would be able to meet our programmatic deadlines and place some orders if we were to be able to move forward with the high priority items that are on the first page. But staff recommendation would be to fund the full list of capital items that were deferred from the budget discussions last year.
So your high priority items are 1A and your critical items are 1B.
Yes, but they're all ones.
Yeah, I find it, I flipped the page and saw the word critical, and I'm high priority and critical.
So is that what staff would recommend for us to approve both of these?
Staff would recommend that we approve
Okay.
both of them.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
these are items these are things we're going to have to pay for. This is not a wish list. These are things we're going to have to pay for at some point, and you either pay now or you pay later.
And if you wait till later, it's probably more.
That's right.
And
Can I make a motion to approve them then?
Okay, be real clear about
I'll
what
make a
you're...
motion to approve both lists.
Okay, there's a motion to approve both lists. Is there a second?
Second.
A second, okay.
I have a question.
Okay, question?
Just later if we need to.
Item under engineering service high priority, the first one, it talks about 2 positions for control inspector. Have they been hired, or is that part of the need in order to hire? Am I reading that correct?
Those were authorized in this past year's budget.
It's 2 vehicles
The positions were.
for those positions.
Correct.
he's asking, are those positions, we
yeah,
already have
yeah.
the staff on
Okay.
board.
I'm not sure if we have the staff on board, but I know they're positions that were authorized within the
Correct.
budget.
All right. Just wondered if they were there. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got I guess, a comment. So when we last discussed this, I think it was back in January, we were given this list, and I think I was the one who asked if we could sort of see it in priority, mostly because I think what we're being asked to consider are these expenses, which are of high importance. But I know that there's other items in terms of operations that we have to look at, especially with regards to personnel throughout the city, which I believe at a certain point we're hearing that. I don't know if that's today or if that's in 2 weeks or sometime.
That's at our next meeting. We'll
That's in our
do that.
next meeting. So there's another item that'll come up that'll have significant, in terms of ramifications of how much money has got to be spent, which is a very important item, which when we talked about it, at least from what I learned about it, we've got to do something about that seriously soon, because we've got some, I don't know the term, but we've got some vacancies, I guess, especially in critical areas, higher than what we're used to having. And that's no different than other places throughout the country, but we've got to look at that. And I just think, we've got these costs, we've got those costs, we've got the costs of a number of items that will particularly, or I guess I should say potentially, take place in the community with regards to some of the economic and public health impacts. I'm almost wondering if it's possible. I mean, I don't want to hold off on voting on the stuff that needs to be approved like now, especially the stuff that's got a timeline on it that if we don't get it, it could really slow things down. But part of my hesitation is for us to vote on this, and then we get to the point in which we got the next big item, and we're like, well, yeah, we really, really need this. And then we get to all the other items that are going to address some public health and economic impact things in the community through nonprofits and other things. And we've not been able to see all of it in one clear picture to say, okay, here's what it means to fund this in full and only fund this, you know, in this X amount. So that's where my mind's at. I would actually make a substitute motion to actually approve the high priority items, which I think are broken down as the ones that need to be ordered now, and then essentially come back to hear these once we hear, I think in 2 weeks, about the other operational items and maybe get more information about what's going on in our community as well. And that's really just, I know that's a really long motion, I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, but really just trying to get an idea of the whole picture here.
There's a substitute motion that's been made to just approve the first page of items. Is there a second? Okay, that motion fails for lack of a second. Is there any more questions on the, on the pending motion, which is to approve both lists?
Just a discussion, Councilor Hudson, you know, I agree, we're just kind of mumbling about it, but I think it's important that we get this approved and get it in the budget. We can amend some of this stuff down the road, anything needs to be changed, but for the purposes of getting these contracts moving forward in place, especially with the rise in prices and everything that's going crazy in the economy, I think we got to get these critical and some of the non-critical, whatever items underway. These are real costs that we're going to have to pay. And so today's probably the best price we're ever going to get for the rest of our lives. So I support this.
And if I could just make a
Yes.
comment. So I do support you, Councilman Jefferson. I understand what you're saying, but I also know that we can make amendments. And so I think it's better to just get it through and then see if we need to make some amendments to prioritize something that comes up. So.
Okay, any other comments before we vote? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes.
I would like to add, just, this isn't in the form of a budget amendment. We will have to do that administrative piece, and we'll bring that back to council at the next meeting.
Okay. All right. So next, I think we're having an MWBE update. I don't know who's presenting. Jerron, are you presenting on that?
So I've asked Duran to give, to let council know where we are as it relates to our conversation at the last meeting. At that meeting, we talked about the disparity study, gathering some information about what we're currently collecting with our MWB efforts here locally. But then also, we wanted to look at least 3 cities to be able to say what measures were they tracking prior to their disparity study, and then what changes were made and what new information were they able to track after they had the disparity study. We haven't quite gotten all 3 of those cities, but I wanted to make sure that council understood that we were still moving and when we would expect to bring all that information back to you at one time.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I think Tasha just gave my briefing update.
Thank you, Jerron, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
But in addition to what the manager said, I think that our goal is to have something back at the next council meeting. And the cities that we're looking at now are Winston, Greensboro, and Asheville. So that's where we are. Some of this information is from the standpoint of what practices these cities had in place. Then after having the information in the disparity study, what practices they changed after that, pulling some of that information in and understanding that each prescription for each municipality is a little bit different. So we're pulling that information together, and our goal is to have something back at the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Do you hope, when you come back to present that, do you hope to have that in a written form for us as well?
That should be in a written form, yes, sir.
Okay, good.
What we ran into this week is one of the cities that we reached out to, they were having some interruptions in their staffing. and we weren't able to get all of that information back to provide the more holistic picture for you. So we wanted to wait till we had an opportunity to talk with that city.
Just one question before you go. You can hear me through this. When you talk about the cities, how much of a difference does it make because when you look at the population between the three of us, obviously, we're the lesser of between Winston and Greensboro. When you talk about cities that has done the study in the past, are there any other ones that kind of had a population close to us? I can't remember what Asheville is right now, but
You mean like
Asheville's a little bit
like a
smaller.
small community, like a Burlington or a smaller community?
yeah, around close to it. Because what do we be like 115?
We're 114. We can look and see if there's a smaller, we have some other cities that we compare ourselves to when it comes to looking at our staffing levels and in terms of compensation. We can include some of those, at least one of those that's a little bit smaller community than Greensboro and Winston and Asheville. They are larger than we are, but they have been tackling the issues of trying to grow their MWBE programs over a longer period of time, which is why we thought those would be good examples. And I think there's still a lot to be learned from them, even though they are larger than High Point. Again, the disparity study is going to be tailored to our community, our businesses, and what we can do here locally. So it's really a study that's focused on what you have available in your community.
Right.
So I think there are benefits to both.
But that was my concern. I just,
Sure.
because they're 283, I think, or something, ballpark it.
They're large.
And then there, the different businesses in their area, they're more diverse when it comes to type of businesses and stuff. I just didn't want us to come up with an unrealistic, result of looking at someone as opposed to ourselves.
What's going to be important for us to keep in mind in doing this, if we decide to move forward with the disparity study, is any changes that we want to make to our current program and practice. The disparity studies gives us the basis to start. That's our starting point for us to determine how we're going to move forward in the future. I see it, and shaking. Grounds to do it.
Make changes. Asheville is actually smaller than we are,
About 92,000,
Yeah.
about 92,000 for Asheville.
so it's kind of a good mix
Yeah.
of the cities that they've chosen.
Good, thank you.
And just to reiterate, the study, to the manager's point, provides those data points for next step of action. So the prescription for one community might be different than another depending on what their facts are on the ground. So the study and the information is a reflection of what that community plans to do and how they want to move forward. It's not necessarily population locked, but I think that's a good mix with the larger and smaller communities, as the manager was saying.
Thank you.
Is there also a way to get the statistic of the entire pool, what percent is women-owned? I mean, it makes sense to me that if we're trying to get 10% and only 1% is minority and women-owned,
Actually, your study
will
will
tell
give
you
you
that.
all of that information.
It'll tell you that.
okay.
Yeah, most of the companies register with the state, I think.
We have those numbers in-house,
Yeah.
but a study will give you a good overview of how many businesses were out there and available to actually do whatever job it was that the city was looking for at the time, and how many actually applied, that kind of thing.
Can we get our hands on an actual,
Perfect.
one of their studies that we could look at? Okay. 'Cause I'm sure it's all
A
public.
lot, we can see if they have them on, some of them have them on their websites.
Okay.
We can see if they're available and share a link.
I'd be interested to see, like you were saying, what data is provided. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
that it? All right. Okay, so we do have next on the agenda is a closed session for purposes of personnel and for discussion of a possible property acquisition.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
There's a motion and second to go into closed session. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, council's now in closed session. Soon as Special meeting, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the special meeting is now adjourned, and city council will reconvene for our regular meeting at 5:30.